Can everybody hear me? You can hear me all the way in the back? All the way up there? All the way over there? Over there? You can hear? Okay. And how about over there? Can you hear? You can hear. Okay. Thank you. Well, good morning, everybody. Welcome to this wonderful convocation that we have. This is something we have every year. It's connected to POW Recognition Day, which is actually 2 days from now, I do believe. That's right. So tomorrow, of course, is U.S. Constitution Day. And that is always on September 17th, and POW Recognition Day is always on September 18th. And we always do this convocation. We try to get it right at those times and dates. U.S. Constitution Day is the 17th because that's the day the U.S. Congress ratified the U.S. Constitution in 1787. And I always find that tremendously profound and significant because for all our men and women who serve in the armed forces, they all have to take an oath. And that oath is always to defend the Constitution of the United States. And I believe we are the only country on the planet Earth that sends our men and women into harm's way to defend what is in essence a piece of paper. But it's a piece of paper that has some of the highest ideals ever espoused. And so it's most appropriate that we are all here today to gather to listen to our very special speaker. I'm going to turn the presentation over now to Stephanie Steinhorst, who is the Acting Chief of Interpretation at Andersonville National Historic Site.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Stephanie Steinhorst, and I'm the Acting Chief of Interpretation at Andersonville. You all live here locally, and so hopefully you've had the opportunity to visit our national site just up the road here from Americus. It's an amazing opportunity to learn not only about Civil War history, but about prisoners of war throughout American history. Our museum is the only National Prisoner of War Museum, and it's just up the road. So once again, great opportunities. At Andersonville, we obviously do talk a great deal about what happened 150 years ago, what happened at the military prisons that held Civil War prisoners of war. Here in Sumter County, of course, it was Union prisoners being held by Confederate guards, but across the country, numerous prisons where similar conditions were experienced by both Confederate and United States soldiers. As part of our 150th anniversary, which is happening right now, this week, we have brought in not only individuals, historians, and descendants to talk about what happened in this area 150 years ago, but also modern-day prisoners of war, and obviously we're hosting individuals from the Ride Home organization. You'll see them around town today and this week. Individuals who obviously have served, many of them. Some have even been POWs themselves. As part of our obligation to tell the story of POWs not just 150 years ago, but the possibility of it today, I'm going to be introducing our guest speaker. Great opportunity to hear her speak about her own captivity. One of the few women to speak on this issue, and so you'll get a chance to hear her today. I'm going to introduce Brigadier General Rhonda Cornum. Talking about her experiences, she has had a wide and complex career across the world at this point. Joining in 1978 the U.S. Army, she would go on to study and do research as a surgeon, ultimately going on to work at Walter Reed Army Medical Center. Later, she'd earned a doctorate in both biochemistry and nutrition from Cornell University. And the part that she'll be talking about today happens in 1991. While assigned as a flight surgeon with the 229th Attack Helicopter Regiment, her helicopter was shot down, and she was taken prisoner. And I'm going to allow her to tell that story, but for the rest of her career, it goes on. After her release, going on to serve again, many times working with hospitals across the world, most notably working with Fort Bragg Support Hospital as commander, Also, the Army's Landstuhl Military Hospital in the early 2000s, and of course, spending 6 years working in urology. She holds numerous medals, most notably the Distinguished Service Medal, Legion of Merit, Distinguished Flying Cross, Meritorious Service Medal, Air Medal, and Purple Heart, excuse me. Today, when you visit the National Prisoner of War Museum, you can have the opportunity to see her flight suit that played a role in her captivity and release, and so you have a chance to see that piece of history not only in person, but again today you get a chance to hear her speak in person. And I'd like to introduce Brigadier General Rhonda Cornum.
All right, well, I'll go through the same spiel. Can everybody hear me? I can hear myself, so that's good. Being a prisoner of war is a bad thing, just in case anybody was wondering. And you don't wake up in the morning planning to go be a POW. And so the message here really, and I will tell a few war stories because they're modestly entertaining and very instructive. But what you need to realize is being a prisoner of war is really like any other adverse experience you will face. Now, how many people here are prior service, military? How about have a parent who's in the military, or a brother or a sister or something? Okay. Yeah, it's not very many people. And so I can almost guarantee none of you will ever be captured. So you could say, I don't need to listen to this because that will never happen to me. And you're absolutely right, it never will. And that's a good thing. We all go to war a lot of times so that it doesn't happen to people in this country, it happens somewhere else. But something bad will happen to everybody. You will either won't get in the graduate school you want, you won't get the grades you want, your significant other will dump you, your dog will get run over, something bad will happen to everybody, it always does. And so it isn't whether or not something bad will happen. What's important is what you do when something bad happens. And the difference between prisoners of war who come through that experience and do really well, and you know, I got back in, I got shot down as a major, and I retired 3 years ago as a general, so I did okay. The difference is what you do with that. And so I think there's some cliche about it's all about plan B. It's true, it's all about plan B. So we went, I was a flight surgeon at Fort Bragg, and I'm at Fort Rucker, rather, and we got notified, you know, the war started, Iraq invaded Kuwait in August of 1990, and we all went. And then we waited until everybody else showed up so that we could go push them back out of Kuwait, which we did very successfully, incredibly. It was probably the shortest, fastest, least lethal war, on our side anyway, in history. I mean, we lost almost no one. And so we were all feeling really, really hooah. And so on the 27th of September, I've got 2 pilots myself, I'm all my stuff, you know. Because I extracted a bunch of people from wrecked helicopters, not ones that got shot down, ones that ran into each other and stuff. Because I was at that time a trauma person. So I had all, you know, stretchers and splints and IV fluid and warmers and all that junk you have when you go do that. And so on the radio, we're getting gas in my helicopter, and on the radio somebody says, do you have the doc on board? And Gary says, yeah, I got the doc on board. And do you have all her stuff? And I said, oh, somebody got hurt, we got him. And he said, yeah, I got all her stuff. And so he said, well, let's look at, there's been an F-16 pilot shot down. He's ejected, he's on the ground, he's got a broken leg, and we know all this because he's talking on his little radio. And he's talking to the AWACS aircraft. He says, and you are the only people with helicopters who could possibly go get him. Will you go get him? And we said, of course we will. What a great mission. It's only about 30 minutes away. We'll whop out there. We will get him, we'll load him, you know, we'll land, some Apaches will provide cover, some infantry guys will go provide ground security, I'll do my medical thing, we'll load him back up, we'll whop back, and we will all feel like heroes. That was plan A. And it went really well. We got about 1 kilometer from that guy, and then it all went to crap, because you always hope those Air Force people will eject someplace far away from where the anti-aircraft guns were. Hope is not a method. That did not happen. He actually ejected right into the middle of the biggest ammunition supply point and refuel point in southern Iraq. So as you can imagine, the same people that shot him down shot us. The 2 Apaches, they have Hellfire missiles and stuff, they got away. My poor Black Hawk had the tail boom shot off and we crashed right there. I came to, and I got knocked out. I didn't ever admit that while I was in the Army because then I couldn't have gotten back on flight status, but I did. I got knocked out because it was like hours later and dark. And so I came to and I said, well, I'm dead. Because I knew it was an unsurvivable wreck. I must be dead. And that just tells you your brain doesn't work really well when you've had a concussion. And I said, but I'm not sure, 100% sure I'm dead. So I'm going to try to get away from this wreck so there's not a fire. I don't die in a fire. So I did that. And I pushed myself out from under the pieces of a wrecked helicopter. And then I realized I couldn't stand up or I couldn't even turn over. Now, I didn't really know what was wrong with me, but I tried again, still unsuccessfully, still lying there flopping like a fish. And then I tried one more time, and this time I looked up, and oh dear, there's 5 guys with guns pointed at my head. So my first thought was, not dead. And I'm a prisoner of war. Because there's there's only 2 choices. It's not like there's a third option, I'm going to wake up in Oz. I'm either dead or I'm going to get captured. I'm in the middle of Iraq, and they own this place. So I have to admit that my first emotion was gratitude that I'm not dead. So then one of these guys reaches down and stands me up and grabs my right arm, and it dislocates my already broken right arm. As it turned out, I had gotten shot from behind, and that's what broke the right arm. So I'm standing there, and they're all looking at me, and I'm looking at myself, and I'm kind of standing there. And so the right arm now goes to here and goes down. And I look on the other side, and the left arm's doing the same thing. As it turned out, I had been holding on, and the aircraft flipped at a different rate than I did, and I torqued my arm off. So I'm standing there, and they're making a lot of Iraqi noise, and take off my helmet and my gun, and steal my camera out of my pocket, and blah blah blah. So I realized I can't move anything, and I was really worried. Now, a flight suit, which if you have never owned one, you don't know, but it's got Velcro that keeps the arms really tight, so that if there is a fire, it doesn't get up the sleeve. You've got Nomex, it's fireproof. So I was really worried because I couldn't feel my fingers and I couldn't make them do anything, and I was really afraid they're going to take the Velcro off and my arms are going to fall out of my sleeves. I'm going to throw up right there, and that just seemed gross. There's no pride. Pride is important if you're a soldier. And I said, there's no cool points for throwing up on the enemy. So eventually the fingers started working. I said, well, this must be okay then. They're still attached. They may not, and if they're still attached and they're still moving, they probably can get fixed. So again, my personal emotion at that point is I'm grateful that they're moving, not I'm so sad I broke my hand, because it does you no good to feel bad about what happened in the past. It's already happened. Now you have to work forward. So forward looking, I'm someday going to get these things fixed. So ultimately, the first guys that catch you, they take you to their leader, who's probably a lieutenant, and that's the lowest ranking officer they got. And then that guy says, what are you doing here? In perfect English, by the way. And I said, well, I'm Major Rhonda Cornum, and I wrecked a helicopter. I figured that was obvious. It's on his bunker. And so he does the intelligent thing. He says, take her someplace else, So we go to the captain, and he kind of does the same thing. And in between the captain and the major, who finally made a decision, they drug me out of this second bunker and threw me down in a group of Iraqi soldiers. Now, of course, you got the 2 broken arms. You can't catch yourself. So luckily, I didn't just fall on my face. Went to the knees, pushed my head up and looked around, and there across from me was Sergeant Dunlap. Now, the truth is, I didn't know Sergeant Dunlap from Adam. I said Sergeant Dunlap on his shirt. That's how I knew who it was. But he was one of the infantry guys who was supposed to be providing cover. It didn't work out all that well, but there he was, and he was already tied up because he didn't break any bones. And I have to say, I was never so happy to see anybody, because I, at that point, thought I was the only survivor. There were, in fact, 8 people on our crew, and only 3 of us lived. But I thought for a while I was the only one. And what that told me was that relationships really do matter. And then it really made a huge difference to me that I wasn't there alone. In the sea of bad guys, there was actually somebody else on my side. Now, That euphoria of having seen this guy did not last all that long, because the next thing that happened is 2 of these Iraqi dudes pulled their handguns out of their pockets or holsters and held them to the back of our heads, and we were fully expecting to be executed right there. I wondered about it. I thought, well, why did they bother to haul us out of the aircraft? They could have just shot us over there, you know? And I thought, well, maybe they're trying to get information. So because I'm a person who believes you must find something positive in any situation, because the situation has already happened. There I am, I'm kneeling there, the guy's got a gun on my head. So I'm diligently searching my brain for something positive to take out of that. And the only thing I could come up with, it was weak, but the only thing I could come up with was, well, at least it won't hurt. You know, it's gonna go right in the brainstem, and I will know nothing, and then I really will be dead. So I did ask Troy later what he was thinking, and he said, I hope they don't shoot me, I'll splatter brains all over Major Cornum. You know, he was only 20, he didn't have all that wisdom, I guess, but, so the guns go click, and we're not dead, and they stand us up and take us to the next place to get interrogated. So my assessment in hindsight is it was just to scare us, so maybe we'd been more forthcoming with who we were and what we were doing. It didn't work, but I assume that's what they were thinking. But so we survived that. We went on. Eventually, they took us to prison in a little town called Basra. You may have heard of it. Spent a few days there. That was the only time they let us talk to each other, and we made sure that we told the same stories, which, you know, if you're going to lie, you want to make sure that the lies are the same, because that really pisses them off if they're not. And then they'll beat you worse. And eventually it took us to Baghdad, and then I went because of the broken arms, and it turned out I'd gotten shot, which I really hadn't paid too much attention to, except that I was really weak and dizzy a lot, which was all the blood loss. So they took me to the military hospital, the prison ward of the military hospital, and they took Sergeant Dunlap to the prison in downtown Baghdad. And in the hospital, the 3rd survivor of our wreck showed up, and he was even worse off than I was. He had a fractured pelvis and a fractured femur. And as it turns out, the surgeon at that hospital, the chief orthopedics, was a brilliant surgeon. I mean, he'd been educated in the UK. He was, had published papers and probably invented some of the tools that we use now. And he was a really very professional guy. He not only took the x-rays of both of us, but then he showed me I did tell him I was a doctor. So he showed me the x-rays. He said, I want you to go explain to your sergeant what we're going to do, because he'll probably have more confidence in you telling him what we're going to do than me. So I did that. So and then, but the next day, he did put me to sleep, and so he could make the arms arm-shaped again and put casts on them, which was a vast improvement over just being loose and broken. That really was bad. So then, you know, another day or two went by, and eventually they load us back on another bus, and they take us to downtown Baghdad, and they offload us at the prison. And you know that, even though they don't tell you that, because you have a nose like mine, and when you're blindfolded, you put your head back, and you can see under the blindfold, and you see all these other prisoners that look just like you know, so there you are. And so we spent one day there, and then they load us all back on another bus, and took us and unloaded us at a hotel, marched us in, everybody took off the blindfolds, and it was the Rashid Hotel, and they said, you're with the Red Cross now, you're safe, we're gonna get you back home. So obviously what had happened was, you know, the war had ended. You know, it is better to get shot down the last day of the war, by the way. You'll be there a lot less time. And they were trading us back for the Iraqi prisoners. So we had the Red Cross was very nice people. They had this hotel, and they had generators. You know, we had knocked out all the electric grid in Baghdad, so there was no electricity to be had, but they got generators running, and they had lights and hot water on the 3rd floor, and they said, we have a private room for every one of you. And we all looked at these guys like, what do you not get about this? We've all had a private room, that would be solitary confinement, for somewhere between 1 and 6 weeks. We don't need a private room. So I would say what we did was we kind of had an adult slumber party. We had 26 people, and we used about 3 of those rooms. We just kind of kept circulating through it and talking about what happened. And I have to say that it was probably the only therapeutic thing that happened. The opportunity to talk about and share with other people who've had similar experiences in a safe environment is really helpful. Because when you come back, everybody looks at you who's had nothing like your experiences, and they look at you like, you've got 3 heads, and so you're not really excited about talking about it. But this was really good. And so then they took us, the next morning, they did in fact get us out of there, and we went to the Baghdad airport, and they offloaded the first 300 Iraqi guys, and they unloaded us, and we flew to Riyadh, Saudi Arabia, went from that airplane out to Bahrain, then got on the hospital ship, the Mercy, spent a few days out there, everybody getting checked out and getting debriefed and making sure people get out of their PJs and go to work and stuff. And eventually we flew back to the States. And they very nice. They had a big welcome home ceremony, and the mandatory listen to the Secretary of Defense thing, but they brought everybody's family up, so we all met our families. And I have to say, that was the only time I cried for this whole experience was when I saw my daughter. Because even in my most optimistic day, there was always the chance I wasn't going to see her again. And so I was pretty relieved. And then kind of went back to work. Had a bunch of surgery to fix the arms, to fix the knee, and fix the whatever else was broken. Then just went back to work. Didn't really think that much about it. Apparently other people thought about it though, because people started asking me, what did I think? What did I think about the war? What did I think about women in combat? What did I think about a whole bunch of things? Things that I certainly had strong opinions about, but no one had ever asked me before, so I never really thought much about talking about them. And here's where it's important to realize about Plan B. I got to testify in front of the Senate about women in combat and women flying combat aircraft and changing laws that allowed greater opportunities for everyone. That would never have happened if I had not got shot down. So the plan B is no, I didn't go pick up Bill Andrews. Luckily, Bill Andrews, the guy I went to pick up, by the way, did fine. They picked him up too, and we all came back on the same airplane. So taking advantage of what happens as opposed to grieving about what didn't happen is the key to being successful. And that's really what I think people need to know. It's fine to grieve. When something bad happens, it's fine to grieve. You should always grieve if you lose something that's important to you. That's if you're not doing that, you're probably a psychopath. But once you've done that, it's time to do something else also, not just keep doing that forever. It's time to go say, okay, so this happened. So what am I going to do to take advantage of this? I read a book when I was a really little kid, way younger than you people are, because I know I'm old enough to be everybody's mother and somebody's grandmother. And I would have sold 1 million copies of this book for this guy if I was like 12. I don't remember who it was or the name, but the punchline was it was a teenage boy whose mother had unexpectedly brought him home a little brother. I was very sensitive to that. My mother did that every 5 years. And so he's looking at his little brother in the crib, and he's stuck babysitting. And he says, Andrew, the great men in history are those who can turn a disadvantage into an advantage. And I'm going to find some way to turn you into an advantage. So that is really, I think, the key to being successful. That didn't make him like, I'm happy to see my little brother. No, I really wish he wasn't here, but here he is, so I'm going to find some way to make a good deal out of this. And so then later, when I had the opportunity to do some things, I could draw on this. For example, when I was the commander at Launch Duel, and we were responsible for 26,000 evacuations through our hospital while I was there for the first 2 years. If the worst thing that's ever happened to you is getting yelled at, then you're really worried about that. I mean, that's as bad as it gets in your life. So you will do a lot of things to avoid getting yelled at, even if maybe they aren't what you think is the best thing to do. If the worst thing that's happened in your life is you've almost been killed a couple times, and you've seen your friends get killed, then somebody yelling at you doesn't look nearly so worrisome. And so I made decisions, and if somebody was going to yell at me, I said, oh, okay, but fire me then. But this is the right thing to do, and this is what I'm doing until somebody does fire me. And so it gives you a lot of confidence in yourself because you know that you will survive whatever they do. They're not going to lock you up for not sending your patient to the downtown hospital and taking care of him yourself. So it does give you a little freedom that you didn't have before you knew you could do this thing. But probably the thing that it did for us the most was that eventually the military services all recognized. You know, I'm sure you've all seen newspapers and TV things about the rates of psychological problems in returning veterans. And so I was the Assistant Surgeon General, and I was sitting with the Chief of Staff, and we're at one of these many psychological dysfunction meetings. And he says, Rhonda, we got to do something besides just keep finding and treating more disease. I said, yes, sir, we do. We have to spend as much time on people's psychological fitness as we do on their physical fitness. I said, we start from the day they show up in the military, and we work on making them stronger, faster, and more agile. But we do nothing about their psychological fitness. We just hope. I said, we don't do that with anything else. We don't just give them a weapon and hope they know how to fire it. We don't just give them an MRAP and hope they know how to drive it. We have a very deliberate, safe, progressive training program. And that's what we need to do for psychological health. And there are clear, scientifically demonstrated ways to do that. And he said, okay, well, your next job in the Army is to figure that out for the Army and institute it. So that's what I did. And it doesn't make you just a better soldier. It just makes better, more physically fit, emotionally strong, mentally tough people. And we believe, obviously, those are people that will make better soldiers. But they also make better parents, better friends, better employees, better teachers, better everything. So I never would have had the opportunity to do that if that misadventure in Iraq had not occurred in 1991. So I guess what I want to encourage everybody to do is have strategies for coping with misadventures, not necessarily military ones, because most of you won't ever have those. But everybody will have some kind of misadventure, disaster, drama, trauma, adversity in their life. Everybody will. And have a plan to deal with it successfully. And if the way you're doing it right now hasn't been working all that well, try something different. And there are clear ways to do that. That's really probably all I want to say, but I am more than happy to answer questions if anybody has any. I realize I am the last thing between you and lunch, but I also know he won't let you out quite yet, so you would be better served to find any question. Thank you. Third graders ask questions.
So there's a mic floating around. Raise your hand if you have a question. The mic will get to you.
Yes, ma'am.
Question down here.
What part, after you were captured, did faith play into that at all? Was it common sense?
The question is, what part did faith play? Now, one of the things, one of the 5 ways types of fitness is spiritual fitness and spiritual strength. When people say faith, they may have a very specific meaning with one of the patriarchal religions or something. So the answer for me is I had great faith that the Army would come get me. I had great faith in the organization, I had great faith in the mission, and that my job had gone from rescuing this guy, which obviously that didn't go so well. My job next was to keep the people, myself, and the few people that were in my sphere of influence alive till they came to get us. So yes, faith is important, spiritual fitness is important. How you achieve that, often it's through religion, often it's not. Sir, that would be you. Oh, he's getting the mic. The mic is migrating north.
Yeah, you know, it might be easier if you do have a question in mind. You may want to come down, make it easier to get to the mic.
Or I'll repeat it because I can hear it and the other people can't.
So understanding that you're a prisoner of warfare, was there anything they tried to do to you, like to rape you, like torturous things?
I was sexually assaulted while I was there. I always thought that was an interesting thing. I didn't tell that story originally because everybody sort of thought, they would just sort of stop thinking about the issue then. I would just like to point out that that's only a question they ask women. And I finally figured out why that is. It's because they only used it as an excuse to not let women do things, and they don't use that as an excuse to not let men go to war. And secondly, men always say, no, I wasn't. So regardless of what happens. So it's useless to ask somebody if you know they're going to lie either way. But, torture, I wasn't badly tortured in any other way. First of all, I was shot down on the last day of the war. So it was to their advantage not to kill us. And I was badly enough hurt that I wouldn't have done very well had they done much more to me. It was definitely better. They were much harsher in interrogation if you got shot down early than if you got shot down late. I see a question in a gray t-shirt. Being a female, anything, there's always advantages and disadvantages. I suppose the advantage is if you're smaller, you eat less, and so if they're not feeding you, you don't lose quite as much weight because they don't feed you very well. We all lost I was only there for a little over a week and I lost 25 pounds. The disadvantages, however, and this is a little bit humorous, but it was problematic. If you break both your arms, you cannot get yourself out of your clothes to go to the bathroom. And men have an easier time with that. And so that was problematic. I had to get the enemy guys to come back in and take my clothes off. That was not a pleasant discussion, particularly when they don't speak English. But in general, when it's a professional thing, if you're prepared, it really doesn't matter what gender you are. If you're not prepared, it really matters even less what gender you are. Then you're really going to all do badly. Unless you, sir, have one.
I do.
Ah.
I don't have a mic.
I'll share.
So, General, you mentioned the physical preparations, but we do seem to be sorely lacking in the psychological preparations. And we certainly have seen that in terms of soldiers coming back from all those experiences in Iraq and Afghanistan and the terrible suicide rates of our veterans and effects of PTSD. Has the military, clearly the military recognizes this as an issue. And war as a whole has got to be a destabilizing activity for everyone involved. Do you see hope for the future? Do you see us moving in the right direction?
First of all, psychological, all the bad things, whether it's depression, anxiety, post-traumatic stress disorder, suicide, those do not happen randomly. So people who are on the low end of psychological fitness have a much higher rate of all those things than people who are on the high end. But we don't select for those things at this point. Everybody can come. So there's certainly no question that if you're already psychologically fragile, and an awful lot of people join the military to get away from some bad experiences that were happening in their lives, and this is a way out, but they come with some of that psychological baggage, and there's no question that if you're already suffering from post-traumatic stress disorder from like childhood abuse or something, that you are much more likely to be susceptible to future trauma. So we are spending more time trying to get people help before they go, as opposed to after. I do think that the people who join the military are a fairly representative sample of Americans. And we have a lot of people who are not dealing well in and out of the military with disappointment, with difficulties. The military, however, because it's a national thing as opposed to a local thing, you see the vast numbers of them as opposed to you only see the ones in your town. So part of what we're seeing is just a reflection of society, but it's amplified when you've got, for example, either a party or a profession that is essentially anti-war. And they will try to demonize the war part of that experience, as opposed to we just don't have some very psychologically robust people. Sir?
The subject you just got into
The other sir next. We're listening, man.
When I grew up, I joined the Army in '67, so my time was in the 1950s. When I grew up, we didn't have cell phones, we didn't have computers, we didn't have all of the instant gratification devices that everyone has today. We were playing with things, assembling stuff, experiencing failure on a daily basis in little ways, and developed ways to handle that failure as we were growing up. And one of the observations that has popped on like a little light bulb for me over the past few years is that many of the kids that are growing up today don't seem to have that experience where they are dealing with failure in little ways on a continuous basis and adapting mentally that failure is a part of life and becoming comfortable with that so that when they experience failure, it's not a tragedy and a devastating event. And I personally believe that maybe there is some aspect of the suicide rate in the military that is related to that societal dynamic that is going on, that many of our youth today are not as prepared for failure because they live in the two-dimensional plane on cell phones and...
I think it has to do with their parents prevented them from failing.
Well, there too.
Yeah. And it's not the fault of the young people. They are smarter, they're just as loyal. I mean, when you and I joined the military, you weren't planning to go to war. Everybody that joined after 9/11 knew, I'm going to war. And they still joined in droves. So people are loyal and patriotic, but not prepared. That's correct. That they're bubble wrapped. They're not. You can't. People are afraid somebody will steal their ugly kids, so they don't. They won't let them play outside unsupervised. They have play dates from the time they're 2. By the time you've got all the stuff on, you've got your knee pad, your elbow pad, your helmet. Nobody wants to go ride their bike anymore. You got to pee by the time all the stuff's on. So. It would be very difficult to be a kid now. And if you don't do all that, it would be very difficult to be a parent because they'd arrest you. So we got some problems to fix.
Anyway, I appreciate your comments on that.
Now I'm ready for this part. Huh. Get that mic up to your mouth.
One check.
There you go.
Okay, so basically my question is, did they have like a time limit or like a ransom for you? Or did America already know that?
No, the question is, how did we get back? And really, there were certainly special forces and special operators who were tracking us, so in case the negotiations with the Iraqi government did not work, they were going to come rescue us eventually. But that's a higher risk thing than just trading. So, when that war was really pretty one-sided. We took 80,000 prisoners, they took 26. So we gave them, and we didn't want 80,000 Iraqis hanging out in Kuwait. That's ridiculous. So we started sending them back, and they sent us back quickly. It was a negotiated settlement. Yes, ma'am. All right, we're waiting for the mic again. Next time, I'm going to suggest 2 mics.
I wanted to know, since you said that since we prepare our soldiers physically, but we don't prepare them psychologically, what do you think that the military can implement so that we can better train our soldiers so they can be prepared for?
Well, we've done that. We first of all, we have an assessment. It's called the Global Assessment Tool. And it measures people's psychological strengths in both emotional, social, family, spiritual ways. And then we give them individual feedback on where they stand compared to people, their gender, their rank, their age, that other unit. Nobody sees that but the soldier, him or herself. So they get that back. And then there is mandatory training throughout the year, from the time they're in basic training until later, about better decision making, how to do delayed gratification, how to get yourself out of pessimistic thinking, if you've got bad coping skills. I've never found a problem that was improved with a hangover. And yet, you will find numerous people who, when they have a problem, get drunk. Now, the problem is still there. They've spent a lot of money, and they feel bad. That never solves anything. So, not that I've never gotten drunk, by the way. Let's not say that. But I don't do it when there's a problem. I do it when I'm in a good mood. when I have a problem, I solve it, you know. So we teach people to do that. We teach people coping skills and then celebrating skills. Don't confuse them. Okay, thank you. Oh, there's a question over here. The question is, what do I think? Now that's a very important question. That's not like what I know, that's what I think, because I don't think we all know. In previous wars, you went until it was over. So you might be gone 4 years. So the question is it better to go and come back and go and come back and go and come back, or just go till it's over? Well, this is also the longest running war we've ever had. So you'd be really discouraged if you had to go till it was over. You'd have been there for your whole life. But there is no question, it's hard to go and come back. It's hard to reintegrate into your family. They have learned to get along without you. You're there a few months, and then you're training to go again. And then you extract yourself from that family again. They feel abandoned, and so I think that is a very difficult problem. While we have an all-volunteer force with a cap on its strength, though, I don't see a solution for that problem. We either have to do what the Marines do it better because they have many fewer repeat deployments because they have a much higher turnover. They are a young force. They expect somebody to come in, get trained, deploy once, come back, deploy again, and get out. That's their vision. They don't have the vision of we're going to have guys stay for a career and go every second or third year. I don't have the answer to that problem, though. But I think there's no question that has contributed to the problems we're seeing. Oh. What's my name? Rhonda Cornum, Cornum. You can Google me. There's a couple million hits out there. They're not all true, but you're welcome to read them.
My real question is about the positivity you had in the situation. Were you able to have the other soldiers as confident as you were in this situation?
I think so. I know certainly Sergeant Dunlap was. I mean, we were talking about whether they're going to send us back to the front when we got out. I said, I don't think they're going to send me. I'm kind of a liability like this. But, positivity and the ability to apply evidence and seek out evidence about things that are going well, as opposed to just seeking out evidence about how bad things are, is a skill that anybody can learn. When we teach this, and we do teach this in classes, and the most important thing to realize is that an event happens. An event doesn't necessarily have a positive or a negative thing. It just happens. Whether it's so in a perfect example, which hopefully nobody here is facing today, is you go to the bathroom and you pee on the little stick and it's a positive pregnancy test. That's not positive or negative. That's just a fact. Now, some people will have that fact and they'll say, "Oh, my life is ruined. Oh, I won't be able to finish school. Oh, my boyfriend didn't want a baby. Oh, my parents will kill me." They'll say any number of things. Some people, it's the same 20-year-old female who went to the bathroom with the stick. Now it's blue. Some people will say, "Oh, great. I wanted this to happen. We were trying. Maybe it happened a little earlier than I expected. It's okay to have a kid when you're 20 because who wants kids around your house when you're 60? And so she'll be gone by then. And oh, it's better to have it now because I don't have any money, but the kid won't care now, and later I'll have some when they care." I'm speaking from experience with that one. Let me tell you, I had my kid at 20. And so the event happened. The event is a 20-year-old female with a positive pregnancy test. If everyone you knew personally did badly with that, then that's confirmation bias that you're going to do badly. That's not inevitable, but it's inevitable if you stop trying and stop going to class. And so you need to then go find evidence of other people who had the same circumstance and did well and say, well, I would much rather be like that one. So you have to learn to find evidence to support a different outcome. And people have to learn that it doesn't happen automatically to everyone. So that's just one example, but there are about 28 different actual practical skills you can learn to do to have a different outcome in your life than than one you were having. So if you're happy with all the outcomes, don't change a thing, by the way. But if you're not, I recommend changing a few.
Time for one more question.
The mic is coming. And they're fighting over it.
Hi, my question was, I noticed that in the lovely speech you were saying a lot of things about women and women in the military and all that stuff. So my question is, do you have feminist views, or do you consider yourself a feminist, or do you just have a strong opinion where it comes, in the case of women dealing with the military?
I have, my only strong opinion is equal opportunity. And I look at women and men kind of like, I raise thoroughbred racehorses in addition to a few other things I do. And I look at people kind of like horses. There is no question that if you have a bunch of young fillies and young colts, they behave differently with each other when they're just loose in a pasture. No doubt about it. You can tell. You can be far enough away, you can't tell what gender they are except you watch them. The colts are biting and they're rearing and pawing at each other, and the fillies are just eating grass. And then once in a while, one will put her head up and they'll run around a little bit and they'll go back to eating grass very placidly. The boys are still kicking and biting and pawing at each other, just like little boys do on a playground. And some older boys do on a playground. But when you get them in on a track, it doesn't matter. It matters who's faster. And you can't tell who the gender of them either. You just, somebody's in better shape, somebody, I mean, if you're Zenyatta or somebody, you can beat almost anybody. Male and female people are the same. A bunch of girls will giggle and shop and stuff, and a bunch of guys will do something else. But when they have a job to do and they're well trained to do it, you won't really notice which gender they are. I'll just notice how well they did it. So I don't know if that makes me a feminist or not, actually. That's not a word I've applied to myself ever. So I think I'm just a person who believes in equal opportunity, that you should have a chance to do whatever it is you want to do, and you should drive yourself hard enough to be really good at it, and then they won't care what gender you are. Okay. Thank you.
General Cornum, we want to say thank you very much for your service. Thank you very much for these words of wisdom that were very hard earned, we well know, but thank you. You're getting a standing ovation. Thank you all very much. It's time to disperse, have some lunch, go on to class, and talk some more about what you've learned today.